or any other news publication about water since I took a seat on this board January 1, 2014.
So the article that you wrote indicated that you were a board member, but that you were writing in your individual capacity. So you were a board member, but the information that you contained in that article, according to your article, was derived from public sources. And so that gave you the opportunity to write that article at a time when you served as a board member. So I respectfully I disagree with the statement as a whole. But
thank you.
Sure. And what you said was that SNWA was paying an inflated price, and that inflated price was going to last for a period of either 20 years or $4 million, whichever was achieved first. I understand now from discussions outside of obviously this room that the district intends to increase the rate to Wolf Creek to $12.46 in January of 2020. That's my understanding derived from the public information. My retort to that, or the golf course's retort to that, is that a 500% increase is neither fair nor reasonable, nor can it be based upon what SNWA or Las Vegas chooses to pay for the water that is shipped downstream. And so what we're suggesting is that there be a rate that is derived independent of the SNWA that does two things. One, it provides a fair return to the district so that it can profit upon the shares that it owns. And then two, it balances that fair rate with the need of the golf course to have a sustainable water source at a fair price. If this were a regulated body, which it isn't, if the Public Utilities Commission required that there be some regulation, it would make you balance those two things. The reasonable rate of return to an investor coupled with or balanced with the right of the ratepayer to a fair and reasonable rate. And that's what we're asking for. We understand there's going to be an increase. We've offered an increase. That offer is to be effective immediately upon reaching an agreement, and that's what we're trying to achieve. I do understand that there are public improvement projects that need to be funded, but they don't need to be funded on the backs of the golf course. So again, I'm open to answer any questions you may have.
Again, I don't believe that we really can ask a whole lot of questions until we agendize this, which I do believe is slated in the very near future.
Very good. Thank you again.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Sylvester.
I'm Elgin Carpenter. I'm on a Falcon Ridge Community Association board, and one of our main concerns is that there is a lack of definition for responsibility of who's responsible for what. And this has come to light. If you go back historically, the basic design, construction, test, and inspection, the developers follows your guidelines. And they submit the drawings, you review them, you model them, and you finally approve them for the installation, and that is followed to the end until water is turned on. And this has worked, and in these standards, the water meter outlet side was the point of change and responsibility. The outlet side, downstream, the property owner was responsible. Supply lines were the water district responsibility. That has been held for years. It is typically the standard for all cities. It is understood by all customers, and even the state statute says that if meters are used, then the outlet side of that meter is the service point. All of a sudden there came out a decision that the board was informed that for Calais Village, that service point is at the Pioneer Boulevard. And actually it is on the line for Falcon Ridge PUD. Well, Falcon Ridge PUD is just a border of about 700 acres. We don't own any property, but because of that point, any lines from that point inward to Calais Village has now become a gray area. Calais Village does not exist. If it was a single property with a single owner, then I can agree with you. Just like the Brickyard, which is a single property, single owner, and that is a different story. Instead, Calais Village is now 11 owners. They each have a meter, and that design was proposed to the district, and the district approved it, that every lot in there will have a meter at the property line. And therefore, you're back to the old standard. But right now, it's still the property owner is responsible for any repairs. And that needs to be cleared up. It needs to be understood by everybody. So that's the main concern here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we will go ahead and close public comment, and we will move on to the nomination and election of officers. And we'll go by seniority and see if anyone has a nomination, so we'll start with Rich Bowler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm used to the old overused attitude that is not broke, don't fix it. So my motion would be to keep the president, vice president, and treasurer that we have now in the current positions for the upcoming year as well.
Okay, and those are?
I need vice president, Ben as vice president, and Mary as the secretary treasurer.
Okay, we have
I make a motion that we, in that regard.
I would second that.
okay, we have a motion on the table, a first and second, all in favor? Motion carries. We'll go on to board comments, if there are any.
Evan.
Okay.
I have none.
And the only comment that I'll make tonight for president comments, thank you for your trust in me and doing a good job. I've enjoyed my years of service, some years less so than others. It's been a privilege to work with everyone here on this board and to work with the staff here. We have a really good staff. Kevin and management have done a tremendous job, and our staff here, I feel, has done a tremendous job in taking care of the water needs in this valley. And then also, one of the public comments that was made, and this is just for your information, we did do, was it a 10 or 30-year plan? 20 years.
The 30-year
The
financial
30
plan.
Yeah, we did the 30-year financial plan, and we also looked at when we're gonna need new wells, new storage tanks, and other things like that. We did identify, and it is subject to change, but 2025 is when we have put on the books to do a basin study. It has been talked about, and it is scheduled. 2025. It's based on the growth of this valley and based on projections. As the valley changes from year to year, the projections will be updated as needed, and that's kind of where we're at on that. All right, we'll go to the consent agenda to approve the agenda minutes from our January 2nd, 2018 meeting, the financial statement for November 2017, and to approve bills paid since our last public meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Item number 5, for discussion and possible action, consideration to determine the party responsible for the pipes and water-related infrastructure associated with the properties in Falcon Ridge Community Association, Calais Village, and any others similarly situated. And that goes to, start off with Kevin on this one?
Bo. Yeah, just consulted with Kevin and, so we have a situation in Elgin, and Elgin, is that your first name or last name?
That's my first name.
First name.
Cartlands is the last name.
Parkland, representing Calais Village?
No, I'm
Falcon Ridge
the
Community
president of the
Association.
Falcon Ridge Community Association Board.
Okay,
And we got involved because of this shift in the point of service. because that raised considerable issue to every property owner in that area. And there have been other issues that are similar to that, in other words.
So the backup materials for this item,
And hold on, is anyone here from Terra West or so you're the sole representative tonight?
Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
Terra Vest representative.
Okay.
Martha Ortiz was supposed to be here, but I'll take any questions you have regarding those memos that were sent out. And in other words, in response to your legal person, as well as we sent out the same memos to the city. Because of now we have a gray area, it affects the development of future undeveloped land, because they don't know where you're gonna put the point of service. Those properties are all gonna be split up into smaller properties. And as I say, Calais Village, you keep bringing that, your lawyer keeps bringing it up. It does not exist. That property was broken up into 11 separate properties, and there's separate owners. And the other part of the way back development, which is Falcon Mesa Business Park, was in the same thing. It is broken up into 19 properties. And each property has a meter at the property line. And then when it comes down to repairs, Water District said, we're not responsible. Too bad, okay? The same little feeder line that you had a lot of problems with, that you repaired some people's property, the line, yet when it came to a property in the Falcon Mesa Business Park, you basically refused to repair it. But it's the same pipe that was used throughout that development. So why have two different things? And now you're saying that each property will have to have repair. If the main line breaks, that not only feeds those 11 properties in Calais, the old Calais village, that same lines go on to supply water to the adjoining developments.
All right, listen.
And now if one breaks, that poor owner who owns that little piece of land there is responsible for the repair, and that is not fair.
Okay, Bo?
so, this project has changed names multiple times. The original final map refers to it as Gonzo Mesa. There are communications from Martha who we provided notice to concerning this meeting. They've referred to it as Terra West as Calais Village, but regardless, we know what we're talking about. This project is across from the hospital. I think it includes part of the Walmart area, that whole Falcon Ridge area. But specifically, there are some properties there where, and I wasn't with the district at the time, this is going off of information that were, of individuals who were with the district at the time, but when that project was approved, as I understand it, from staff who was present at the time, the developer did not want to place the water meters at the property line, which is customarily what is done in most situations. Instead, the developer wanted to put the water meters on the building, so beyond the property line. However, the backflow device, as I understand, was placed at the property line, and clearly the location of the property line itself is indicated on the final maps. A lot of the backup materials that were provided relate to communications between the water district and those of Falcon Ridge, or maybe at the time Calais Village or Gonzo Mesa, discussing this issue of who takes responsibility for these water lines after the property line. The district's governing documents make this rather clear. Essentially, it is that the district loses control or its ability to, its jurisdiction over the lines, either at the property line, at the backflow device, or at the water meter. And specifically says whichever is most upstream. In this case, as I said, the water meter is located after the property line. When that decision was made to approve the project, even though the water meters were not located on the property line, as I understand it, the developer for the developer's own reasons, and I can think of a number of reasons, I'm sure Travis can too, because of his background as to why the developer may see some advantage in placing the water meters at the building as opposed to the property line. But it was expressly discussed that the district, even though it would approve the project, would in no way take responsibility for the water lines after the backflow device and after the property line. And as I understand it, the developer agreed to that. I think maybe the major problem here is that when the owners now bought into these individual buildings within that project and some of the other projects nearby, maybe they weren't made aware of that situation, but either way, the district's governing documents provide, as I said, that the district loses its responsibility and control at the property line, at the backflow device, or the water meter, whichever is most upstream. There is a statute, NRS 445A843, that talks about where a service connection is, and it refers to 3 potential locations. One of them is where the public entity loses its control of the water system at the meter, which is probably the most common area where the district loses its control. Or the third option is a mobile home park, which is not relevant to our current discussion. So consistent with the district's governing documents, the district loses its control at the property line in this situation, which is also where the backflow device is. One final thing I'll mention, and then we can answer any questions you might have. If you look at the final map for the project, there is no dedicated or accepted easement through the middle of these projects. The easement is the outer 10 feet perimeter of the project, and so the district, even if it wanted to maintain the lines, which I don't think it does according to staff, it would have no easement into these projects to maintain those lines. So it would have to obtain some kind of license or consent from the property owner to maintain those lines, which would be contrary to district policy and contrary to what the district has done in the past.
So I'd like to make just one comment as far as based on, as you were talking about, this was like something has changed, and
Yeah.
that's not the case. As far as with these commercial subdivisions, such as this one, we have many situations like this. The area where the Red Hills Theater was, that area, the Brickyard, like you pointed out. These commercial Walmart, commercial subdivisions, they're laid out and recorded as large plats, and then you can go and sell those as you're developing and going like that. And they're helpful for the developer, because if he doesn't have a full master plan of what everything's gonna go, he's able to begin and go from there and sell those that way. Now, as far as I do remember going clear back since I've been here in 2000, the water district had certain standards and that we did follow, which dictated that in those specific documents, I do remember that it dictated that the end of what was required for the water district was the backflow preventer. Now, in our current documents, it states that it's the at the property line or the meter. And so I did want to kind of correct as far as there are those documents showing that it was dictated at the backflow preventer. Now, I do believe what may have happened in that situation was just as what may have been pointed out, that as this was developed, it was understood that way, but then as people bought into that, they did not know that that was the situation. And there, in mind, is a problem, you know, as far as not understanding what you're buying. So.
As you go back to 2000, it was a completely different developer of that whole area.
True.
It was Corcha,
Mm-hmm.
and Corcha went belly up. So those properties were purchased by individual builders. And the master plan, what Corcha presented, a la LA Village, it basically wasn't there anymore. And in 2007, the people that bought these properties, as I say, it was broken down from one property into actually 11 properties. And that became now what you might say, I don't know what you, just a shopping center basically. That's what it is. And each individual owner in there basically is gonna have a meter. That design was proposed to the district. You approved it. Yes, it was.
No, the original, when this was originally mapped, before, and then in 2004 with the commercial, I'm looking at the final map right now with that, of when the will serve letters and this gets approved, that was the intent of the backflow preventer is the cutoff between, so as far as, I do agree with you that when the people were buying into there, they did probably not understand all of where that property, they may have assumed that it was at the meter, but per the rules and regulations, clear back then, it was clearly stated that that was for a commercial subdivision application like that, the backflow preventer was the point of cutoff right there. So
and what was the decision in 2007? When they
it's been that same thing ever since. I can never remember that this situation has ever changed from that. I've been here since 2000, and I have never been shown any documents that the water district has that would contradict that the backflow preventer would not be the cutoff.
There's no communications about a backflow preventer, which is a main line, but all I'm saying is that in 2007, that whole area, a layout was provided, and the design was finalized by the district through your simulation, the testing, and everything else was finalized according to those drawings. In fact, the lines and where you wanted the lines to go through, there was provided utility easement for those lines, and those access lanes and access roads into that area became because to give you easement for your lines. That was all done for you. And that was approved, signed and approved, the drawings. And
With
it
the
was built that
understanding-
way.
But our rules and regulations always stated that it was the backflow preventer, and nowhere on those documents does it say that this is a public line coming through there. So, I mean, as far as, I understand your frustration in the fact that they were not told that these are their lines, but as far as the water district's stance on that, in their rules and regulations, it has been very clear from the beginning, that since I've been here, that nothing would have changed from those saying that the backflow preventer is where the line stops and the private begins.
Which backflow preventer?
The one off of, well, you have one off Falcon Ridge Parkway, and I believe there's another one off of Pioneer.
There's a ton of
Pardon me?
these.
There's several of them off the Pioneer.
Yeah.
So
Anywhere where you cross into that public or private area that's owned by someone else out of the public right-of-way, you should have a backflow preventer, and that would be the cutoff of what is public and what is private.
and that is not required by that development, it is required for your distribution of water to the adjoining properties as well, and to maintain service. That's what it is for. It's got nothing to do with supplying water to those individual meters.
No,
If there is
we would supply it to that private entity, which would be that commercial subdivision, and then that responsibility would end at that backflow preventer.
Well, anyways, there are individual properties, and also in your guidelines, if you go back, that the outlet of that meter is the point of responsibility chain. And that is what everybody knew, everybody understood, that the lines feeding those meters is water district responsibility. And
Well,
that's it.
And you can look at that situation on that one, but let's look at the Red Hill Cinema. They're exactly the same situation where they have meters at each of their buildings. I worked on that particular one, and it's exactly the same situation. Why don't we have the same problem there? Is because when they were buying, they understood that situation. So, I mean, it is a clear fact that at the backflow preventer, that is where the private and public stop. Mostly on those commercial subdivisions, that's where you'll see that application. So, I mean, I do sympathize with, those that, as they were buying into that, may not have understood that concept, but honestly, since I've been here, since 2000, that has been the way that the rules and regulations of the water district have stated that particular case.
So why do you need the backflow?
The backflow preventer is required so that if you have, that line is your cross connection point. Anything past that somebody goes and does anything with landscaping, if they do anything, that backflow preventer keeps any stagnant water, any contamination from getting into the main line. That then, because we're responsible for everything within the public right-of-way.
Every irrigation meter and has a backflow. That is a requirement.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But why do you have an 8-inch backflow coming off a Pioneer? I think that's required because in order for you to maintain more active area in case of a water breakage, that you will not basically decrease the pressure on a larger area. That's what that prevents.
It has multiple uses, but the biggest reasoning for that on a commercial subdivision is so that you can meter individual buildings and then you're not forming one bill, but everybody gets to pay what they are using, but then you still have a defining line of where that public and private line ends and begins.
Yeah, but a commercial subdivision doesn't exist.
That's the way it was
These are
mapped.
individual owners.
I realize that, but that's the way that this was mapped and the way that it was set up when that was done. And so with the water district, when you're saying that it changed, it did not change because that's the way it was originally mapped with the commercial subdivision.
Mapping has changed.
Go to Rich and then Dave.
Yeah, a couple major points there. First of all, if there were easements don't just disappear, they're recorded. I don't see any easements on that map for the water lines going through the property.
On the maps that I have and that I have seen, there's utility easements right down each of the access lanes that go into the development.
They aren't shown on the map as our utility easements. There's a big problem. There's a big problem with owning pipes that go under private land. That's not something that I would encourage us ever to do. That's why our policy states that. We have a problem going onto private land to fix public lines. That's just not a good policy. I agree with Travis. There's lots of subdivisions in town that fall under the same rule. We're not having the same arguments with it. I understand that this project went defunct, and that's probably a big part of the problem. The developer developed it as a commercial subdivision, was allowed to do what all the other developers have done in town, the same project, the same metering system, but then when it went defunct and it sold off to individuals, that's when the problem came in. I think we've been very uniform and consistent with our application of this, of our statute. It's either the backflow, the meter, or the property line, whichever one's further upstream. And we haven't deviated from that as long as I've been on the board and for any time that I can remember before that. So it's a bad situation for the property owners, I get that, but they also came in and bought when the development was defunct. So it's kind of with those default developments, it's kind of buyer beware. I've been involved in a lot of them.
Dave?
Yeah, thank you. It's Dave Alwick. I was brought into some of these conversations as a councilman, and I just want to add some personal experience to this. And Travis, you know, you worked with Bullocks when we were working on the Interstate Industrial Park. I own commercial property in the MTTC. And we had the same thing we have in industrial development, where the water ends at the property line, and we have valves there that we have to maintain, and we have to take care of that. So I'm aware that particular development there has the exact same situation. The solution I can offer is you add that, the cost of maintenance of that or potential repair of that in your reserve study as an association. I'm assuming this has a sub-association that's in each industrial park, and we do that there. We put that in there, and so every month there's a certain amount of money that's put into that account. So if something happens to that association area, then the association takes care of doing the repair, not the individual landowner or parcel owner, because it just happens to run through his property. So that, I don't know if you remember, Travis, when that was it. I think it's the exact same thing, but you cover the cost through your reserve study, through your owners association, and that way not one owner holds the area fixing it just because it happens to be there. So that's just my comment.
I think this situation, there was an association that went defunct,
Right.
and then now there's no longer association. I think that's part of the
Well, but
problem.
I'm saying they've got roads.
It was built
They've got
to that standard, but now-
they've got roads in there. They've got parking lots, and they've got all kinds of stuff that they really should. I think by state law, is supposed to have a reserve study for that if it's a common area.
I think that's the issue that Rich is pointing out, is
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, that's how it's done in
Right.
town, that's
Right.
the way most every project that I've seen is done. In this particular case, I think they actually have the property lines go out into the parking lot, and they have like cross-parking easements and cross-parking agreements, so we don't have that formality, but yeah, that would be something that they might consider in order to address the problem.
That way, not one individual owner is responsible for it.
Right, they could master meter it, and then you have to, I mean, when we did develop the Smith Plaza, you could master meter it, or you could meter each building, but the problem is you have one intensive water user, you have one that's not.
Well, you don't even have to
You
change
know.
the metering situation right now. It's just a matter of who's responsible if a pipe blows up under a certain piece of property. You take it to an association versus it just happens to be under that piece of property. And I mean, I understand it doesn't exist now, but you can set them up. I mean, you can go in,
I'm saying the same thing, Dave.
just, you can set it up,
Yeah.
and that's the solution to this.
It's
I
not
mean,
a
you can-
solution. Why should the people that bought that property have higher water rates?
They
Because
won't.
indirectly, because you're gonna make them pay for those water lines.
I mean,
That increases their water costs. So that's the bottom line. And if you have not seen it, I got a section here where it shows the utility easement right down the access lanes where the lines are, and throughout that whole area, that is the case. Those lines were, the easement areas and those access lines were put there because of your design requirements of the lines that are needed. And that was the case. And the meters were all located next to the property lines that they each owned. If it wasn't able to put there, in fact, in one area, they actually put a little island of concrete so that they could have the meter on the property line.
Well, you are correct in saying that there will be standards that the water district sets forth as far as to have a looping system. The reason for that is for fire protection. It also is so that you don't have stagnant water. So just because we're gonna say that this isn't a commercial subdivision and that's private on that side, there are still regulations that we're going to hold you to for the betterment of that whole thing. But that does not state that we're going to maintain that, because we still hold that the public part of that line goes at the backflow preventer. And I really do believe that, I hear your point as far as you believe that the people will be paying a higher payment for the water, but in actuality, it's no different than any of these other commercial subdivisions when they have a master HOA or that does care for, because right now they're all required to take care of the asphalt themselves. If that's the case, they need to do an HOA to help each other out for the water lines, the asphalt. This situation right here that you're talking about is not just a water line issue, if that's the case. It's about the asphalt, which here in a few years, you're gonna see some serious, it's going to start to ravel. You're gonna have everybody upset that, why do I have to pay for this when everybody's coming through my area? So this is not just a water district issue, it's a situation where it would be best if all of them could come together and the small amount that they'd be paying together into an account to help for that is going to be better for the long run for the whole situation, not just the
The
water.
asphalt is definitely part of the reserve study.
So why isn't the water line? It's
Because
exactly
the
same
water
situation.
lines that feed the meters are the responsibility of the water district.
Is the sewer line also part of that reserve study? Because the sewer, throughout that's got to
That
be a
sewer,
private line.
the sewer line is not included in the reserve study.
I
That is a
guarantee
city
that's not
responsibility.
I would be interested to see that
It's
that would be
not.
a
Well, I would
city.
be interested in getting the city, the water district, and property owners
What's that?
together and decide what really, where does the responsibility start and where does it end? That's the main thing. We're not clear here, absolutely not clear.
We made very clear where the responsibility is on
Yeah,
this.
you made it clear as far as you're concerned, that's true. I understand that. We can move that service point anywhere we want to, doesn't matter where. Next thing you know, you're gonna move the service point outside some of these sub-associations and put it next to the street, and then they're gonna become responsible for the entire water distribution system in that sub-association.
I don't know that
That's not the case, but it would be at the property line. It would be at the property line.
The property line is usually spells out where the property line is in a subdivision.
Right, and that's why, with the original mapping on the commercial subdivision, that's where the backflow preventer was placed. And so, that's why I keep coming back to,
Well,
with that going defunct like that.
I heard your message, thank you.
Okay.
we kinda had the same situation in Wood Creek, that building that albatross that my dad owns with his partner, we share a water line. We can't turn the water off because we share, at one time they were the same owners, now they're separate owners, but now we share a water line because they weren't individually metered, so it just, when you buy stuff in default, this defaulted bank and trustee sale, it happens.
No formal action needs to be taken, unless the board member is inclined to make a motion, that nothing is required at this point.
All right, item number 6, for discussion and possible action, consideration to approve language for a memorandum of understanding or agreement to be proposed and entered into between the Virgin Valley Water District and the Bureau of Land Management concerning the Golden Butte National Monument, including the district's rights and access to water resources. Go to you, Kevin?
Sure.
Sorry, Mike.
You may recall, I reported to the board that we had a meeting in December with the BLM staff that was a very favorable meeting. And one of the discussion items as part of that the BLM suggested, so that there wasn't any misunderstanding by future boards or general managers of the water district or BLM staff, is to put together a memorandum of understanding that specifically clarifies issues within the Gold Butte National Monument area as far as our right-of-ways or spring sources and access and development and things like that. So I asked Bo to put together a draft agreement that we could submit to the BLM for their consideration, a red line. And this was our first attempt at putting something together for the board to consider and get feedback from you before we submit something to the BLM. So open it up for your discussion and thoughts on this document.
Barb?
I think this is a good first step. I don't think this should be the last step. MOUs can always be changed, amended, ignored. So while I just, especially for the record, I may end up voting to approve this agreement, but I certainly do not believe that this should be the last step we take to make sure in perpetuity, seems to be the popular word tonight, in perpetuity, we have complete unfettered access to those water rights. I still believe the only way to ever make sure 20, 40, 50 years down the road, the only way to make sure we have unfettered access to our significant water resources in perpetuity is to have that boundary moved. So, for the record, depending on what the other board members discuss or bring up, I may vote for this. I'm still not going to give up on moving the boundary.
Aside from the boundary changes though, the memorandum of understanding, is there anything you'd like to change in it, or do you feel
No.
it takes care of what we're looking to accomplish at the moment?
I think it accomplishes what we're trying to do in the interim of changing the boundary.
Any other, Ben?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that. I don't know why anybody would vote against this. I mean, I think it accomplishes a lot of the language that we've been seeking. It goes a long ways towards that stuff. I totally agree with you. Can somebody ignore it or do something down the road? Yes. But in lieu of that, this is a great first step in the direction we wanted to go. So, I'm with you on that.
Thank you, Ben. Rich?
Yeah, I concur. I mean, short of getting the 20 square miles out of the national monument, which by the way has no significant historical or archaeological value.
None.
We're dealt the cards that we have to play, and I think this is in good hands, so I'm in favor of it.
And have we, since we're on this topic, still no word from Secretary Zinke?
No,
Any noise out there that we've been hearing?
no.
All right.
I'll make the motion unless Travis wants to make it.
No, I'd just be saying the same things.
I move that we approve the
We've labeled this as an agreement as opposed to a memorandum
Okay.
of understanding to address specifically, I think one of the issues Barb raised is to enforceability. I mean, I think the district considers this to be an enforceable obligation on both the district's part as well as the BLM's part. So rather than just an understanding that may or may not be enforceable or is it an intent that could change from time to time, I think we'd be better off.
The agenda item said memorandum, and
Or agreement.
Okay.
So will the,
So I will rephrase my motion. I move that we approve this agreement to be presented to the BLM by staff.
Has this been reviewed by the BLM?
No.
so it could come back with
Yeah,
some
no,
modifications?
wants to do that.
Oh, I can't imagine it.
Survey's not here.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a first and second, all in favor? And the motion carries. Wes, accountant's report?
You've got my written report, unless you have questions, I don't feel a need to belabor any of that.
It wasn't as good as your last report but
Yeah. I just have a question for you. How much do we have left in that account?
Which account?
The vehicle?
The lateral replacement account?
As of the end of November, which is the documents that I have in front of me, have $128,000 there. And then we have in the investment account associated with that, 2.5 million. And another 13,000 of interest earned on that. So we're 2.6 million. Give or take. The last, just for reference sake, we did a transfer of funds on the first part of this month to cover expenses associated with lateral repairs covered under the program. From April through December, it was a total of $10,894.
Yeah,
Fairly minimal. You can see the curve, it's going down, 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 and with the amount of money that we're needing to spend to cover those specifically is significantly less than some of the other pipe that's in current use.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Wes. You covering for Aaron?
No,
No, I
Aaron has a report. Good report.
I will ask the question anyway. So tomorrow there'll be a meeting for the right-of-way on well 34.
Yes.
And, I mean, short of the actual meeting tomorrow, how are we looking on that?
It's looking really solid. The meeting tomorrow will be up in Caliente with the BLM office up there, Lincoln County Water District, Lincoln County Power District, and us will all be in attendance. And based on our discussions with Lincoln County Water District over the last couple of months and our ability to be able to utilize their record of decision on their transmission line up there is very favorable for us, and everything's looking really, really solid for our transmission line and well site up there.
Okay. Thank you. Kevin?
Just two projects to report on. Three projects. Well 1A, we've kind of hit a stumbling block on the property acquisition. We talked to Janice Redondo of Marilyn Kirkpatrick's office last week. She had a great idea, and she's going to try and get this on the Planning Commission's agenda this next meeting to try and waive that development agreement piece that the Public Works Department is requiring, and basically just allowing us to move forward. So I haven't heard back from her on how that discussion internal to Clark County is going, but she sounded very positive in the ability to be able to move this forward. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that.
Now with that, once the county decides, will it have to go to the Bunkerville Town Board for
No.
approval?
No.
Okay.
No.
So with that restricted covenant, are they asking for additional improvements to happen on that, or what are the actual?
They're requesting the restricted covenant. So right now, our well site is, we've got an easement for the couple acres that our well is going to be built on from the Levitt Land Trust. And the entire parcel is like 11 acres, and the county wanted the entire 11 acres to be under a restrictive covenant agreement, and Levitt Land didn't want to tie up their future whatever development plans on something that may or may not come to fruition.
Cedar West, isn't it?
But,
Cedar West.
no, Levitt Land, yeah,
Dixie.
Dixie. So anyways, they just flat out said that, they're fully supportive of the project, otherwise they wouldn't have given us the easement and everything like that, but they just did not want to encumber their entire 11 acres with the restrictive covenants that they were gonna hold the water district to for the little part that we have. So
That makes sense.
great.
So anyways, we're keeping our fingers crossed that Janice and Marilyn will get a home run for us. The Flat Top Mesa Tank project, they are putting the steel in for the foundation right now. They're planning, as of last week, they were planning on starting to pour the foundation tomorrow or Thursday. So we're hoping that keeps moving forward on that. And then well 27A, we're just a couple of signatures away from getting that ready to go out to bid, or be able to start construction on that one. So
Has the city signed off on our building permit yet?
We're a couple signatures away from getting that building permit.
Just almost, yeah. They got us the stuff, I think, last
Just
week.
kidding.
Yeah, so, yeah,
Just
just crossing the Ts and dotting the Is, I guess.
you know how the city is.
Yes.
Tough to work with.
So, yeah, that's all I've got unless you have further questions.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. We'll go ahead and open this up for one final public comment. Sandra?
Sandra Raymaker, on that comment that you were just talking about, Kevin, on, over on roll number A. So how is Kilpatrick is she going to solve the problem as far as making it possible for that property to be divided or I guess I'm confused, so is that, because it says in your note here that the next project possibly is that they'll divide that property and sell it to you. So is that how Kilpatrick's gonna go?
No.
Okay,
That's another option that we do have, that it will take a lot longer to go through that process, but the process that the county commission is talking about just has to do with waiving the restrictive covenant requirements for our property.
And if that doesn't happen, then the next move is to get the property to get them to sell,
Yes,
agree to sell the property?
yes, and they verbally said that they would do that, but that going through the county subdivision processes, as we found out on some other issues,
painful.
is what?
Painful?
About a year long.
Yeah, it's a very long process.
So this project is still going to be held up for an undetermined amount of time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments at this time? Bob?
Well, things coming from the public, there's been a trend since I've been here in town that the water district, I think we've made some great strides toward the positive. But I think we're carrying over something from the past that has to be eradicated, and that is, when it comes down to push and shove, your business was created in 1993. All the buyers come in at different stages, but it comes down to responsibility, because it's not good enough for you to say, because my family moved here, I've been here since 19 whatever. That's a two-way street, and it really needs to be negotiated. And a lot of times, that conversation gets kind of dropped at the door of the person that has moved here, instead of the people that are running the water district since 1993 and whatever happened before that. There's a clarity on there that I think revolves around responsibility. And I'd like to see you consider responsibility when you get down to some of these points, because it's a two-way street between the person that bought and the buyer beware stuff. That doesn't fly very good. And somebody that gets a bill for $4,000 because the mail didn't get to them on time, and you just cavalierly say, well, that's the cost of doing business. You don't really check the responsibility. And the other thing is, on Gold Butte, it's like a long-term negotiation. But I've come to some of these meetings where an individual here chastised Gold Butte people and called the person a liar and stuff like that. Well, that's not a really great foundation to really get long-range problems resolved. And when you're in a negotiation, I would really go back and say, who are the best people that don't step forward with a real personal agenda and make it a bully pulpit thing, as opposed to doing the business like good business people and residents here, and that we coexist without just dumping it on somebody and not going any further. But we've made progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any other comments at this time? I do have one final comment. Thank Travis for bringing it to my attention, and I did overlook it. Kevin Brown, our general manager, received the Russell O. Donahue Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual RWAU conference in St. George.
He will give.
Or, no, I'm sorry, he will on February 28th. So,
Congratulations.
congratulations. And as our thanks for your trip down there, we will cover gas.
Yeah. Can you bring us dessert back?
Yes, please bring us a plate of goodies back. Thank you.
Does he have the extra prize?
Yes, he does. He has to cover his mouth and fan his face. And hopefully your lovely wife will be with you, so she can cry on your behalf. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.
No, I appreciate you. Did that when I said you.
Yeah, we'll get back to you.
Well, 17, you got.
I'll let you know.
So your discussion, I guess I just missed what you just reported. That county that was, they didn't really care about that, so then.
All we did was we verbally told them.
Yes. I wonder what we really accomplished here sometimes when they keep dropping it off on our lap. What does anybody really accomplish? There's only one thing that's certain, right? Yeah. Let's talk about taxes. Death is kind of an opinion thing. Yeah. Lots of considerations. Opinion. So, anyway, what have you been up to? Fixing repair day. I go to less meetings, watch them on TV. You don't have to go there. It's just as fun and exciting, right? No, not really. I go to support a few other people. Well, you know, we have an interesting year coming up. I mean that for example. Yeah, exactly. Mean on our Twitter accounts. We're dealing with a lot more assholes. I mean, you know what I mean by that? Yes. It's just an amazing thing. What's even more amazing? Trump is really a deep place, and they're finding that because people are starting to run and scurry. What's funny is the way they're